There's a new release of both Marten and Wolverine and some of the supporting libraries from JasperFx. In this video, I'm sit down with Jeremy Miller, the founder of JasperFx, to show you some of the new cool stuff in Wolverine 8 and Marten 4.
So we just had a huge, I won't say huge, we had a pretty big effort, had a big release cycle with across the critter stack. I'd like to never do this ever again, but we released Marten 8.0 and Wolverine 4.0 at the same time, along with Lamar 15.0 off to the side and some smaller tools. Weasel got an 8.0 and some new library rearrangement. Would like to never ever do that again.
So what's motivating the rearrangement? It really feels like to me, maybe a parallel, from my front end world. Google just came out with a new version of Angular 20, and it's not a flashy release. It was a lot of things that were kind of experimental in the past, made stable, and they've been setting up for things like server-side rendering and things like that in the background. And I feel like with what's going on with these JasperFx libraries is kind of similar, that you're setting up for something, learning from how people are actually using it, but also kind of getting your story down. Is that accurate?
It is. There's some new flashy features, but mostly it's a lot of reorganization. Maybe because everybody watch a high percentage of people watching this are going to be nerds of some sort or another. It's kind of like a spaceship doing a slingshot around the moon before you go to Mars. Um, we're not necessarily moving a huge degree in terms of functionality, but there's a lot of foundational work that's going on to enable what will hopefully be the shot to Mars. Um, like picking out some examples. First, the flashy new features. Marten 8 got a long requested feature from a client of ours, stream compacting. It just, uh, it is actually what it sounds like. Let's say, the best practice for event sourcing is you purposely design it in such a way that your event streams are always short and they don't grow forever. And you're not omniscient. You're not going to perfectly design your model things a complicated way. Streams will get long. So maybe you have 2 or 3 years of status updates going left, going right, renaming a title, something. Maybe you get to a point where you don't really care about 2 years ago. You just care about the current state and maybe the last year's history. What stream compacting will do is take the old segment of the event stream you no longer care about in storage, compact it down to here's the initial state starting at this point, and even give you some hooks if you want to move the really old events off to cold storage somehow. We've got hooks to do that all at one time. It's a little bit pluggable, but this is a way for clients who have busy systems where the data can grow. This is a way to kind of keep the database compacted as you go, because a smaller database is basically always faster than a bigger database, generally.
Yeah, and a lot of people are, they're paying for storage, cloud-based stuff, all that. And I know I remember when that was announced, I looked at the documentation you provided for it, and I will admit, in my applications, I don't have need for that at this point, but I was really struck by, I'm like, that's all the documentation? There's not much there. But it's because the way you implemented it is pretty straightforward, actually. Like, I felt like, oh, if I ever need that in a morning, I could figure that out and implement it. So obviously that came from a real world requirement, right? You said that was from a client.
It did. I
Yeah.
think it might be a little bit of future proofing, but it's the kind of thing of when you need it, you're going to need it. So it's
Yeah.
there. I guess the point I would say to potential users of Marten or existing users of Marten, there's a lot of ways to get started. Happy path, easy path. But just know there's some little fancier stuff you can add on and opt into later to be able to grow to much larger scale of data. And Marten's been used for large scales of data already. So
Yeah.
we got some stuff.
You know, I feel a little comfortable now since you've kind of outed us all as nerds. I will admit, a few nights ago, I had a little bit of insomnia. So I went and read every bit of documentation on Wolverine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I don't think I've ever done it in a cohesive way like that before. It's always been more get me enough to get started. I'll figure it out. Then when I hit a wall, I'll go look for a solution or something like that. And, it was just chock full of little examples like that, that frankly, there's things in there. Oh, I could do this better, but also, oh, wouldn't even think I need that, but it's comforting to know it's there, if I did. So I don't know. I appreciate that. So yeah, I think that is a big feature. I think that's pretty cool and not something that's going to have to cause people to rewrite their things right now. I think.
No, no, no. It's not anything that's breaking anybody's syntax. It's something you can opt into later.
Can you say a little bit? One of the things that was added that I really like, and because it feels like it's kind of bridging the gap between the worlds of Martin and Wolverine a bit, which still confuse me sometimes to be honest. The JasperFx defaults, um,
Okay.
which is kind of a simple little thing, but I really like that approach. And I wonder if you can talk about the introduction of that and kind of what you're thinking, the vision there.
Yeah. So there's, over time, Martin and Wolverine do have some internal similarities. They're both using some runtime code generation, which can
Mm-hmm.
be done ahead of time. They're both doing a little bit of assembly type scanning where they need to know what is the application assembly, which is unfortunately it's actually more complicated than just saying assembly.get entry assembly. But just so you know, if you want to go build your own framework, that's not enough. Um, there were starting to become a lot of flags where you may want to say to both tools, hey, I want you to do automatic database migrations at startup and development time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's I think that's a killer feature of the Critter stack all the way around. Of it just works, get started, go. We'll make the database, we'll make RabbitMQ, we'll make AWS SQS, Azure Service Bus. We will make it just be what your configuration says it's supposed to be for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just get stuff done. But maybe you don't want to do that in production because you've got a DevOps team. Um, maybe
Yeah, there's a process.
on the off chance that the database migrations are not perfect, don't let Martin accidentally try to recreate an index on a 100 million row table in production. And if the folks that had that happen, if you're watching, let's talk. Um, which we are. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of settings that became little things you want to turn on and off. And it was a little bit different from Martin to Wolverine, but logically the same.
Mm-hmm.
And people would frequently forget to do one or the other. And at the same time, you frequently want a little bit different settings for development time, which, local development testing, not production versus production time. Production
Yeah.
time, you want the database migrations handled externally. You want to opt into what we call the static pre-generated ahead of time mode that gives you a much faster cold start time.
Mm-hmm.
So with the Critter Stack defaults, what you're talking about, that is a syntax now. There is one place where you can say at one place, here are my defaults, my default behavior. Here's my tenancy ID style
Yeah.
behavior. So it's a silly thing, but we kind of ran into. Some people use all caps tenant IDs or lowercase or case sensitive, and you may actually want to, not have to make everybody be perfect and force a tenant ID that's detected to be uppercase or lowercase or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So that can be established in one place. The behavior now, your Jasper FX defaults, you can set the application assembly in one place. You can set the service name. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
override it, by default, it would just be the assembly
Assembly.
name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, or the type generation, the source code generation mode. Do you want it to be dynamic, where it's all done at runtime, which is great for development, or do you want it to be static, which is pretty important in production time? And then also um, the auto create settings around any kind of stateful resources,
Right.
Martin controlled databases, Wolverine envelope databases, RabbitMQ stuff. Yeah. So this is something I saw a lot of people having some confusion about. It now was the time to fix that across the board. So there's one place, and then we hopefully make that a lot easier to get exactly the way you want it to.
One of the things, maybe this is a little weird, but one of the things I really appreciated about it was I love it when things are discoverable through the code. I don't have to go look at documentation. I don't have to keep notes. So when I implement that on a recent application, I just put a breakpoint in that configuration function and like, oh, what are the defaults before I change them? Right. That options, argument you pass in, you can kind of see in one place. Oh, maybe I should change that. It's a minor thing, but I think along with that, looking at the release notes, the migration guides, all that kind of stuff over the last couple versions, one thing that doesn't really kind of warrant a bullet point in those things is my sense is things like that. And frankly, error messages have gotten much better over the last few versions, much more useful. Am I making that up, or is there
That,
been some effort on that on your part and the team's part?
that's a continuous effort.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do it, if you're gonna do tools like we do, you just gotta listen. Anytime a user comes up with, "Hey, this I don't understand what's going on with this exception message," you got to pay attention to what clearly confuses people, and as you help people in Discord or GitHub, or as I assist customers, just occasionally go in and tweak the messages to make them more clear.
Yeah.
Change the verbiage, whatever it is. That's same thing with documentation. That's an ongoing process, and if you're going to do what we do, you need to take the Matthew McConaughey character in True Crime. Time is a flat circle. It is continuous. You're never done. You're always going to
Yeah.
be gathering in these improvements, and don't beat up yourself or get frustrated because why am I still having problems? Kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I apologize. I can't think of, I get so many errors that I can't tell you them all because it's me, not you. But there was one yesterday. I was working on something and it had that wonderful thing in the error message was, hey, you're doing this, but you probably should be doing that. Right. It wasn't just what you did was wrong. And I really appreciate when you kind of start getting those kind of hints where you can guide yourself through it. I mean, I do a little bit of Rust programming, and that's one of the big things there is that the compiler messages really help you do it. And I don't want to go that extreme,
Yeah.
but those little things are really appreciated.
Well, I mean, in an ideal world, the type signatures by itself won't let you do wrong things, but
Yeah.
there are a lot of configuration elements, especially with Martin, where we have to do some runtime validation to say, sorry, this combination of things just can't be used together or whatnot. And yeah, that's just something you try to think ahead to what's going to cause people and try to get that kind of assertion stuff up front, but you got to just build it in and adapt over time as you see what problems people actually have.
Yeah. Now that you say that, the times I've noticed that the most is like around like API endpoints. Right. When you are going to have to do some dynamic things. You're parsing the incoming JSON. You're looking at that at runtime as opposed to more of the internal things. So, I think you've done a really good functional kind of having a side effects approach on the edges there to do the validation. So off in the
Well,
weeds
thank
there a
you.
little bit. Yeah. Is there anything else? I noticed there's at least some clarification about the quick append for events, things like that. It seems like that's coming more to the forefront. Is there anything in the world of Martin itself that you'd want to mention?
Um, not in Martin itself. It's a small thing. So Jeffrey and I are about to do another video on command line support, but the .NET Run describe command from the Critter stack actually has Martin content now.
Uh,
That's a lot. There's a lot of work in both Martin and Wolverine that were built really to set up our forthcoming. You know, if anybody remembers Duke Nukem Forever, um, I'm kind of feeling like our Duke Nukem Forever tool we're building something called Critter Watch. That's going to
mhm.
be it's going to be a commercial add-on, but it's going to be the observability and management console specifically for the Critter stack. There's a lot of preliminary work to support Critter Watch that's already built into Martin 8 and especially Wolverine 4. It's stuff that won't necessarily surface to a user, but a lot of it's already there.
So that's the behind the scenes stuff. Yeah, and I'm
Yes.
glad we're going to do the command line thing because I mean that's in the trajectory of what I was talking about with error messages and the type system and all that is even I've kind of changed my approach. Sometimes if something's not working the way I want, I just look at the generated code.
Yes.
I've seen you suggest that so many times on the Discord. Like, before you ask, look at what it's doing. But I think the command line tooling, which we're going to explore in the upcoming video, is kind of becoming my next step before that. Like, how is the critter stack seeing what my idea of what's going on here is? And a lot of times that clarifies it as well when I kind of go astray.
I hope so.
Yeah.
That's all very purposeful. So there is both Martin and Wolverine and future critters. Um, we still buy into the old Ruby on Rails idea of convention over configuration.
Hmm.
Um, some people are going to disparagingly call magic. Some people like magic. Some people like things to be more explicit. One thing I will say, if you are using any kind of conventional goop to make a framework go faster, whether it's naming conventions, whatnot. Your framework just needs to be able to unravel and explain exactly how the magic is being applied.
Yeah.
Um, Wolverine, especially now, the way that it can just show you here's the pre-generated C# code that we make to wrap around your handler, your message handlers, or your HTTP endpoints. Um, and that code even includes a lot of comments. We try to inject a lot of
Hmm.
comments of why is this here? What is this doing? It's fugly code, but it will explain this is exactly the middleware that's wrapped around it. Here's everything that Wolverine is doing when it calls. I think that's I'm going to argue that's a big advantage of Wolverine over a lot of these other iHandler of T, message handler, mediator tools,
Yeah.
because we can show you exactly what it's doing. And then we get into the static configuration diagnostics. We can also show you things like if you say all documents are multi-tenanted. There's always a few exceptions with attributes and stuff. The command line diagnostics will show you, will kind of give you a preview of here's exactly what your app is. Here's what's applied to every endpoint. Here's what's applied to every queue listener, whatever it is. So you have some way of kind of previewing the app before you try to run it and get angry.
I look forward to seeing it. Yeah, we'll do that next. Um, I think, anything else you want to say? One final kind of question that comes up with me is, and it's related to what you were just talking about, the, the approach of not using runtime reflection, doing the code generation, at build time, the way these tools do it. Are there any uh, you know real reports or apocryphal reports of improvements in performance or startup speed for these things? A couple of my clients are doing more kind of serverless stuff, and they're wondering
Mm-hmm.
if this approach, because the reflection stuff is, you can get rid of a lot of that, it will help the startup time on this.
So I won't say there's zero runtime reflection. I mean, there's a little bit of you pass the message in, we do a get type on it, right? For
Hmm.
now. But yeah, generating the code ahead of time. The Roslyn compiler is kind of a beast and a resource hog.
Hmm.
Um, so that part's nice because it's also a little bit of a memory leak. So, but talking about serverless, yes, it makes a huge difference in cold start time.
Yeah. Fantastic. Anything else we should know about the new releases or what's coming
You
next?
know,
Any hints?
well, one flashy thing, Wolverine 4 did have the big flashy new feature was that we extended the multi-tenancy support to EF Core.
Wow.
So, you know, Wolverine is not just for Martin users or Postgres users. If and this again, this is a client-driven thing as well. You can now use Wolverine with EF Core that's using a different database for every tenant for either SQL Server or Postgres. We'll do an outbox for every database. Wolverine can take care of that for you behind the scenes. The middleware for Wolverine, the same kind of tenant ID detection that works for Wolverine and Martin, also now works for SQL Server, Postgres, and EF Core. You just don't really have to think about it.
Yeah.
That works even with all the storage actions, the declarative side effects we do. I guess just want to say is Wolverine is also a fantastic tool if you're developing with EF Core. I think there's a lot of things we can do to simplify your code way beyond what you could do with a more traditional clean architecture approach.
Sounds like another video.
Someday.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Jeremy. Let's take a break here and talk about command line stuff a bit.
All right.
Thank you.